Tanakwe, Talofa, and good morning to you people of the internet, and welcome to Right on the Childhood. On this part of the show, I look at a children's TV show or movie, and look at what made it such a success, or ask what the hell did people see in this? And with this, we're now 10 episodes into Right on the Childhood. Man, I can't believe that a show that started all from my desire to just rant and vent about how much I hated H2O Just Add Water has become one of my favourite series to do. To indulge in just some petty nostalgia for fun's sake. And I'm really glad that you guys enjoy it too. So I decided for my 10th episode to indulge in another childhood favourite of mine. One which enchanted me growing up as a little kid. And that was Thomas the Tank Engine. I love the smell of nostalgia. Originally a collection of kids' stories by the Reverend Wilbert Audrey, it was adapted to the TV screen in 1984 and continues to this day. Thomas's adventures with his friends on the island of Sodor captured the hearts and imaginations of so many children, as well as many a meme lord. But what was it about this little blue steam engine that made it such a popular icon? Well, all aboard as we take a look at Thomas the Tank Engine. Set on the island of Sodor, the Fat Controller runs the Northwestern Railway, with a colourful fleet of trains. Thomas, Edward, Henry, Gordon, James, Percy, Toby, Duck, Donald and Douglas are our first 10. But the cast would continue to grow, numbering around 50 vehicles at my last count. The first couple of seasons saw the show narrated by the one and only Ringo Starr, an unusual career step for the former Beatle, but one I'm grateful he took. He has a natural ability to breathe personality into the characters, and that was something desperately needed to make the show work as it did. It was further helped by the music of Junior Campbell and Mike O'Donnell, with every character getting a little musical theme. Characters are the heart of the show, and this combination both understood it and helped make the show the success it became. But it was the storytelling that further determined the success of the show. The stories adapted from the Railway series shone with everything that made the book so unique, character-driven story that kids could love and learn from. I'm not going to pretend it's this deep work of art, it's a kids show, not the Mona Lisa.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I present, by the Reverend Wilbert Audrey, Thomas the Tank Engine. Is it not beautiful, the wonderful blue paint, the magnificent black boiler, and those magnificent soulless eyes? Gaze upon it, if you will.
But what I appreciate is that time and effort is spent into something unique, rather than a copy-paste piece of entertainment meant to simply distract the kids for a bit. But even episodes which did seem a little like that, like my childhood favourite Thomas and Bertie, still work as being like a kid's story on television. But yet, even if its audience was young children, it didn't talk down to them, and still told stories kids might find interesting, and maybe a bit challenging too. A story arc involving Duck and Diesel is probably one of the best instances of that. It starts off with Duck just going about his regular work, going on arrogantly about himself being Great Western, when Diesel is brought on for a trial. Duck is tasked with training him, though Diesel's own arrogance gets the better of him. Trying to pull a set of trucks which wouldn't budge, he ends up making a fool of himself.
The truck's grown. We can't. we won't. Duck watched with interest. Diesel lost patience. Grrr, grrr.
Now, actually, as a kid, this section scared me. I don't exactly remember what was going through the little me's mind, whether it was the growling or the face, but Diesel scared me. And as a result, I found it very difficult to sit through another episode with him. The episode ends with Diesel being insulted by the troublesome trucks. Despite Duck's efforts, Diesel blames him, though the tender engines butt in with their simple trademark line.
That would be disgraceful, said Gordon. Disgusting, put in James. Despicable, finished Henry.
So Diesel starts lying about Duck to the trucks, and when they find out, they confront him, and the Fat Controller orders him to Edward's yard. And through that, we have our first instance of train racism. In the classic era, the Diesels are almost always the villains, and it worked its magic on me. But in the last episode, Duck tries to get on with work, though an incident with trucks leads him to crash into a barber shop, avoiding a crash with James. Though it seems the barber does not take kindly to it. But after a visit from the Fat Controller, the barber rectifies his mistake, and with Thomas's help... Actually, serious question, where did he disappear to in this arc? He doesn't appear until the 3rd episode. Anyway, Duck is told he will be coming home and that Diesel was sent away, uncovering his lies. It ends happily with Duck's return. Nothing complicated, but a fun little story looking back, and one I'd count among my childhood favourites. And I'd even describe it as a perfect slice of the show, well written with a plot strong enough to keep kids coming back to the very end. The series continued to progress, staying true to its roots, but bringing in new characters as well as creating new stories. Britt Allcroft, the show's creator, even went as far as launching a show called Shining Time Station in the USA, which featured Ringo Starr as Mr. Conductor. Shining Time incorporated episodes of the show, amongst other things, and would even feature the likes of George Carlin after Starr went back to music, and the setting even played a role in the Thomas film. But that's a video for another time. There was plenty of change heading into the 2000s. New narrators like George Carlin, Alec Baldwin and Michael Angelis would take over from Ringo. And in 1997, Audrey passed away. When you do lose a creator, you sometimes don't know what to do. And some decide that it gives them an excuse to go into territory the creator didn't want to tread into for the sake of money. SpongeBob. Thankfully, Britt Allcroft was not one of those people. She knew what made Thomas tick and why it was so beloved, and she did her best to stay true to that as she expanded Sodor. Not always succeeding, but proud and true to her work and Audrey's legacy. The Mid-Sodor Railway / Skarloey Railway arcs told some fantastic stories of their own, and it seemed like the imagination was living on forever. And even when heading into the early 2000s, it could still tell a solid story and build a good atmosphere within. Scaredy Engines is a great example. Thomas, Percy and Duck are sent to a smelters to do some work on Halloween, having heard the story of a ghost engine. And the smelters looks incredibly creepy, with shadows, twisted metal, an eerie red light, sparks. You add in a creepy soundtrack and you've got the makings of a good scary episode. But sadly, that track record was not to last. I think it was around 2004 I lost interest in Thomas the Tank Engine. Star Wars had become my obsession and it was time to move on. And I think it was around that time the writing guard changed over. Most of the original creators of the show had gone by then, with His Entertainment buying Britt Allcroft Entertainment in 2002, following the failure of the Magic Railroad film. And a woman named Sharon Miller became head writer. I did sometimes watch the Miller episodes of Thomas on telly for petty nostalgia and lulz, and looking now, the quality of it just went downhill. The character-driven style was gone, the writing was shoddy, and it was just too much for little kids. But Liam, Thomas is meant for little kids, you numpty. What's the complaint? Okay, let me explain what I mean. When I say it was changed to be too much for little kids, I mean that the stories are too simplistic and generic. You would find them in almost any other kids show or book. The reason Audrey's stories in the show did so well was because of good character-driven stories that wanted to shape imaginations and tell unique stories and teach unique lessons. Not quite like, but in a similar vein to Dr. Seuss. That's why they were both so fondly remembered. In Thomas's case, particularly in meme form. But Miller didn't understand that. We went from stories about false accusations and saving trains from death to difficult bends and wonky whistles. Come on, kids are smarter and deserve better stories than that. And to add insult to injury, by the 2010s the show had abandoned its model animation for full CGI. Something that really riles me up because people know I love stop motion and model animation, and I hope to share a few more shows that utilise it in future episodes. And sure, there are advantages to CGI animation, but there's a tone about models and stop motion that feels so unique, and it's a shame kids shows today have largely abandoned it. But little did I know that while the animation may have changed, there were good changes coming. His Entertainment was sold to Mattel, and Sharon Miller departed and was replaced by Andrew Brenner. Brenner had been a magazine writer and found himself making Thomas stories of his own, and even having a few, unbeknownst to him, adapted into well-received episodes of the show during its heyday, like Henry's Forest. And from what I hear, they couldn't have picked a better candidate. A man who worked with Thomas in the show's heyday brought elements of its heyday back. While you could never hope to do better than Allcroft or the Reverend, Brenner has breathed new life and rekindled the show's spirit. I did watch a couple episodes of his time in the head writer chair, and while I still wish models were used, the stories felt like what modern Thomas should be, or remotely close to it. Though I've heard things haven't been great under Stoughton, who succeeded Brenner as the writer. With too little focus on the other engines, and bits of the educational baby show Miller nearly made it do still rear their heads. As the show continues, it has left a legacy I think even Audrey himself didn't expect. Far from the vinyl recordings of readings, further books were released, there are lines of toys, and it even spawned a film released in cinemas. And while it was poorly received and has been the target of ridicule by the likes of the Nostalgia Critic, it did give us this.
Hey! Sparkle, sparkle, sparkle!
Fuck yeah! Sparkle, sparkle, sparkle!
Woo! Yeah!
While Thomas the Tank Engine has had its share of great moments and dark times, it has been able to enchant the imaginations of children everywhere. Generations loving the stories of Audrey and the adventures on the island of Sodor. Thomas gets a 9 out of 10. And so ends my little trip down memory lane for Thomas the Tank Engine, and my first season of Right in the Childhood. While I do have plans for a season 2 of the series, I thought that it might be a good opportunity to focus on some of my other projects. So I will be taking a bit of a break from recording Right in the Childhood, so I can get a few other bits of content on video games, and probably more demographic friendly review content out there. But if you are wanting a bit more Thomas content, then check out my Right in the Childhood extra with a little bit more Thomas content. But of the fan-made variety. But that's another childhood over. So until next time, goodbye, haere rā.